I could tell by the arrogant, patronizing way they were treating me that this was going to be my chance to say what I had been holding inside for the past few months. I was at the house, my former marriage home, and as I was finishing the final walkthrough to make sure I hadn't missed anything, she just had to say, "Jim, you know you are always welcome here." I sighed, looked at her, and replied, "Well, a couple of things about that. First, the fact that you put a restraining order on me so I couldn't come here shows me otherwise. And second, this will be the last time I ever come to this place. It used to be filled with great memories, but now it's just a painful reminder. So, no, Peggy, I won't be back." She winced. I know it was harsh and we wanted to avoid it, but my lawyer thought it was best for the safety of the kids that you weren't allowed here until things calmed down. It was for your protection as much as ours. Well, thank you for underestimating me. You know very well that I've never hurt you or the kids or even raised my voice. And if it was about me confronting Dickwad, you didn't have to worry. If I ever do confront him, it won't be in front of the kids. But I guess that's what happens when you get involved with someone like him and hire a lawyer who seems to hate men. Just then, Dickwad appeared. He walked over to my soon-to-be ex-wife and put an arm around her shoulder possessively. He looked somewhat ashamed, but his words didn't match his body language. "Jim, I know you were the best of us when we were in the service, but it's been over 10 years. I was genuinely scared that you would come at me in anger when all of this started, and I didn't want to hurt you. I've already caused you enough damage, and I regret that deeply." I flashed back to 3 months ago when I came home from work. Peggy, Dickwad, a process server, and some hired help were waiting for me on the front porch. I was served with divorce papers and a restraining order, and given a suitcase with some clothes. They were so kind as to prepay for a week for me at a local hotel, but I decided to go somewhere else. I picked up the suitcase and walked back to my truck, seething with anger but determined to not show it and do anything that would negatively affect my kids. I drove in the opposite direction of the hotel, refusing their charity. I found another place to stay and spent the next week ignoring all the texts apologizing and asking if I was okay. I consulted a lawyer and found out that I was in a tough spot. Since Peggy was a stay-at-home mom and I traveled a lot, she would likely get primary custody with generous visitation rights, as she requested. She would keep the house, although they had to buy me out of my share. I wondered how they would manage that, considering Peggy's lack of income and Dickwad's recent transition into the workforce after retiring from the Army. But I guess they found a mortgage company willing to give a mortgage to a retired serviceman. Peggy had done everything by the book, except for going after my pension, which would complicate things. After sorting out the legal matters with my lawyer, I took a week off work and drowned my sorrows in a bottle for a couple of days. I was still furious, but I knew that doing anything stupid would negatively impact my time with my kids. I found a nice house in the area where my kids go to school and moved in. That brings us to today and the agreed-upon access to the house to remove my belongings. Once they realized I wasn't going to cause a scene, Peggy told the court-appointed supervisor that he could leave, but I insisted that he stay. I wanted everything documented to protect myself. I asked where my kids were and was told that Peggy and Barry thought it would be too difficult for me, so they stayed with their parents. Well, I said, what's difficult for me hasn't been much of a concern recently, has it, Jim? She began, I know I've broken your heart, and I'm truly sorry. It was never our intention. I know we have no right to ask, but would you consider sitting with us so we can explain? You haven't given us a chance since this all happened, and I think if you let us talk to you, it might make more sense and help you come to terms with what has happened. Yeah, Barry added, I know you can't see it right now, but I believe we can find a way to get through this. I believe our friendship and your love for Peggy and the kids are strong enough to make this work. First of all, I'm not your friend anymore, I never really was. And second, there is no way to get through this, you're dead to me. I'll have to deal with my soon-to-be ex-wife when it comes to my kids, but let me be crystal clear, you and I are done. Now, if you feel the need to explain how all of this just happened to alleviate your guilt, I'll listen for a moment. It should be entertaining to see how you can twist the truth. Hey, I know you're hurting, but I won't let you disrespect the woman I love. You know things won't end well if we get into a fight, Dickwad said. anger flashing in his eyes. I looked at Dickwad and simply smirked. Oh, we'll get into it someday. Just not here and not now. Rest assured, I won't blindside you like you did to me, your so-called brother-in-arms. So, if calling my soon-to-be ex-wife a cheater is what I want to do, that's what I'll do, because that's exactly what she is. Dickwad jumped out of his chair, fire in his eyes. I mirrored his actions and said, oh, please give me a reason. Take your shot. Come on, you coward. Peggy leaped up and grabbed Dickwad's arm, pleading, Barry, stop it. This won't solve anything. You can't blame him, we did this to him. Now sit down. After Dickwad sat down, I considered taking another jab at him, but thought better of it. This was a war, and the argument we just had was insignificant in the bigger picture. After we all calmed down and I declined the offer for coffee, I said, it's your show, let's get on with it so I can leave. Jim, first of all, I want you to know that this has nothing to do with what kind of person you are, or what kind of husband and father you were. I've always respected and loved you, and up until 5 months ago, I was completely happy with our marriage. I was faithful to you. I still love and respect you. Well, your actions don't show that, I replied. Jim, please. I know I've hurt you, and you have every right to be upset, but being rude like that won't solve anything. I can't tell you how torn I've been since all of this started. I knew I would hurt you, but I had to follow my heart. I couldn't settle for anything less than the person I believe is my soulmate. Barry completes me. It's like he's my missing piece. I feel whole with him. I know you wouldn't want to deny me that, and you have to admit that. Before all this, I was a good wife and mother. I looked at Dickwad, who was struggling to hide his smug expression. Oh, how I wanted to confront him, but now wasn't the right time. This was a battle for another day. But first, I needed to bring Miss High and Mighty down a notch. I'll give you this, Peggy. For someone who has cheated multiple times, you weren't so bad. And yes, you're a decent mother. I'll give you that too. Peggy immediately jumped out of her chair. How dare you? Until Barry came into our lives, I never cheated on you. You have to take that back. It's a complete lie. Sit down now. I'm tired of your holier-than-thou attitude. It's time for both of you to learn some humility. Barry, let's just humor him. We've tried to be understanding, but it seems like he needs to take out his anger on someone. Better us than the kids. They both stared at me, smug and satisfied. Peggy said, well, let's get this over with. So, Dickwad, he's your soulmate, huh? Yeah, more than you could ever be. Well, maybe. But until I invited you into my home and offered you a place to stay until you got on your feet, we were just fine. I'll never forgive myself for allowing a dishonest person in my home with a wife that I knew was unfaithful. That, and only that, was my mistake. Trusting people I know I shouldn't have. I'll never make that mistake again. Jim, you keep saying that I cheated on you. You have no proof of that. Because you know it isn't true. Again, I demand that you take that back. Oh, I'm getting to that. But first, Barry, back to the whole soulmate thing. What was it she said? Soulmate, her other half, she feels complete with you. Fair enough, she has a way of making you feel that way for sure. But give me a second, will you? I pulled out my phone and started tapping and swiping until I found what I was looking for. I handed it to him and said, hit play, Barry. Another withering glare, but he tapped the play button. It was a video from about 16 years ago and just happened to be our wedding day. I had it queued up to a specific spot. I listened as they watched. Jim, my love, I've waited my whole life for you. The moment I met you, I knew I'd found my soulmate. You are the other half of me. You complete me. I let that sink in for a bit and then said, call me crazy. But if I'm her other half and you her other half, doesn't that make her like 1.5 person? I mean, she's put on a few pounds since we married, but not that much. I could tell by the look on Barry's face that he was not expecting to see that. Peggy went into damage control mode. Barry, don't give that a thought. Everyone is entitled to make a mistake. Jim was mine until you came along. And with that, she hooked her arm into his and leaned into him, hugging him and fixing me with a smug grin, but I could tell I'd gotten to Barry. I smiled and said, ah, my lovely unfaithful partner, but I wasn't your first mistake, was I? She looked totally perplexed and said, I have no idea what you're talking about, Jim, and stop calling me unfaithful. So Barry, Jim, will you stop calling Barry that? Grow up. So Barry, do you remember where it was that I met your other half? On Paros, when we were on leave, what of it? Exactly right. We were on leave and hopped the cheapest flight we could find and ended up on Paros. We're sitting in the Mad Hatter bar, and in walk these two attractive people we just knew were American. Peggy and her nursing partner were on vacation from their job in Riyadh and came to Paros too. Find some attractive Greek individuals to hang out with for the week. Well, Peggy ended up getting close with this American man and falling in love. I honestly was looking for a week with an attractive Greek woman, but this passionate American beauty stole my heart. The fact that her home stateside was only an hour from my home was a huge coincidence and made us both believe it was meant to be, and it was, wasn't it? My favorite unfaithful partner. Would you stop with that, please? I ignored her. So fast forward a few months. I'd rotated home. She finally finishes off her contract, and I'm waiting at the airport for the love of my life. We're going to move into together and start our new life. I'd retired from the service and transitioned into private life. I was ready, and guess what? Peggy didn't get off the plane. About an hour later, I get a call from her telling me that she had to delay her arrival for a couple of days, but don't worry, she'll be there soon. I was so in love, I didn't care. I didn't question it, and I just went home and waited. Peggy interrupted, yet again, and said, "That's because there was nothing to question." I ignored her, yet again. Finally, our wedding day comes. You were there, Barry. And before we go any further, let's take a look at my wedding video again. Here, take a look at my face as the unfaithful partner is telling me I'm her soulmate. Does that look like the face of a man that's sure of what he's doing to you? I looked at the two of them and saw the confusion on Peggy's face. I've never noticed that before. Jim, were you having second thoughts on the day we got married? Well, up until 10 minutes before the ceremony, I had 0 second thoughts. You had no idea how close I came to walking out. But why? We loved each other. We were totally committed to each other. We were starting our life together. Why would you question that? Let me ask you, why do you think I would question it? What possible reason would I have to question your love and loyalty to me? Jim, I have no idea why you would have questioned that on our wedding day. I was totally and completely committed to you. I sighed. Okay, don't say I didn't give you a chance to come clean. So, I'm standing outside the church with my brother just before you arrived, and this guy I've never seen comes up to me and asks if I'm Jim. When I tell him I am, he congratulates me on marrying you. I ask him if we know each other, but he says no, but he knows you. I ask him his name and he tells me it's Dave Rebstock. As I say this, I look over at Peggy and watch her eyes bug out, and she simply says, "Darn." I look over at Barry and continue. So my new buddy Dave proceeds to tell me that up until a few months ago, he and his fiancée were busy planning their own wedding. And guess, Barry, who his fiancée was? Almost in a whisper, he says, Peggy. Got it in one. And would you like to hazard a guess as to whether or not they were engaged when Peggy and I met? Let me save you the trouble. Yeah, they were. And how about another guess as to whether or not the unfaithful partner ever thought to mention that fact to me? I'll save you the trouble. No, she didn't. And guess where she was when she didn't get off the plane? She was back home kicking old Dave to the curb. I looked over at Peggy with a fierce stare. So yeah, when you say you've never cheated on me before, Barry here, I tend to believe you. But if you weren't so superior, you'd have realized I didn't say you cheated on me, but I did say you were unfaithful, which you absolutely are. So don't ever look at me with that superior, smug look again, because you are a serial unfaithful person. I looked at the shell-shocked duo. The way their mouths were flapping, I thought I was in a fishing tournament, and I'd just pulled the two of them onto my boat. I decided to finish off the unfaithful partner before I turned my sights on Barry. I reached into my jacket pocket and handed Barry 3 sheets of paper that were neatly folded together. So Barry, what I've just handed you is what my new buddy Dave handed me at the end of our conversation. Turns out they were the wedding vows he had written out for your soulmate here when he was supposed to marry her. He had told me that he wished me well. I had told him that I had no knowledge of him before today, and he believed me. He really was a decent sort. Good looking, good shape, and a solid dude. In different circumstances, I could see that we could have been buddies, but not in these circumstances. Humor me, and read the part out loud, the part that I've highlighted. Peggy protested, but it was barely above a whisper. Barry, you don't have to read it. I know what it says. With barely contained fury, I hissed, just read it. David, my love, I've waited my whole life for you. The moment I met you, I knew I'd found my soulmate. You are the other half of me. You complete me. I couldn't help myself. Jesus, Peggy. It's got to be getting pretty crowded in that body of yours. The look she gave me was less than warm, but I wasn't letting her off the hook that easily. You sit there all high and mighty and tell me that you can't deny your feelings, that you found your so-called soulmate and I just need to understand. Well, forget that. You're nothing but a selfish, entitled, unfaithful person. By the time I got to the end of my diatribe, I was pretty much shouting. She looked stunned at the ferocity of my emotion. She could count on the fingers of one hand the number of times I had raised my voice. I had always been able to get my point across with her and our kids with a very calm, but very assertive manner. I've never liked blowing up to me. It showed weakness, but if there was any occasion that called for fury, it was this one. She tried to fight back, but it was a feeble attempt. So if I was so horrible, so unworthy of the wonderful Jim, why did you marry me? Why didn't you just walk away? I sighed. Very simple answer. Ask Barry beside you or ask your other victim, Dave. You're good, you're very, very good. You made us all believe that we were the one. I know I did, and Dave told me the same. And I'm sure Barry is thinking he's the one as well. But history has shown that that's simply not the case, hasn't it? I looked over at him. I saw an odd mixture of disappointment and defeat. And I thought, oh, you have no idea. I'm just getting started with your disloyal self. He, however, decided to let pride get in the way of being humble and put an arm around her, stuck his chin out defiantly and said, "Not to worry, babe. You just hadn't met me yet, the right guy for you. I've known all along that you were the one, and I'm going to spend the rest of our lives showing you that." With that, he glared at me and shot me that self-satisfied smirk. Oh, this was going to be fun. So, Dickwad, you think the unfaithful friend is the one, do you? You're absolutely right, she is. And if you don't stop calling her that, we're going to have a problem. I ignored his childish threat. So, unfaithful friend, does Dickwad make you feel like the one? She sighed, upset at my name calling like I gave a care. Yes, Jim, he does. You did too. I've said that over and over. It's just that Barry makes me feel so incredibly complete, like I'm his entire world. So yes, I believe I am the one for him. By this time, Dickwad had recovered some of his bravado, and he looked at me and said, "I'm sorry, buddy, but when you find the one, you just can't deny what the universe is telling you. I know it's hard being replaced like this, but I know once you see how happy we are, you'll admit it to yourself." I looked up at the ceiling like I was trying to recall something. Ichimet. The one, where have I heard that expression before? Hang on, I think I remember. With that, I grabbed my phone and made a big production of searching through it and finally found what I was looking for. Ah, here it is. This is from Dickwad himself from just 18 months ago. Let me read it for you both. Well, Jimmy boy, rip up my bachelor card. I've met the one. Amy is amazing. We are so into each other I can't tell you. She's smart. She gets me. She's amazing to be around and has a personality like silk. She works on the bass and is just so attractive. I feel like the luckiest guy in the world. We've been together for about 3 months and I'm already starting to think about popping the question. I hope you and the rest of the boys are ready to get together for a bachelor party in a few months, because I'm going to need one. So Dickwad, how many the ones are you supposed to have? Doesn't the term the one mean just one? Between the 3 other halves the unfaithful friend here has and the 2 the ones you have, it's going to be pretty crowded in that king-size bed I shelled out for last year. Old Dickwad looked like he had just taken a shot of vinegar. He looked at Peggy and said, "Baby, I was foolish. I got caught up in being lonely and I panicked. It didn't last much beyond that email and she's in the past. You know you're the one for me." Oh, so Amy wasn't the one, Peggy is? Yes, just like Peggy, everyone is entitled to jump the gun. I smiled and looked down at my phone and started scrolling, so just to confirm also, let me see here. Cindy in Fort Hood isn't the one and… Hold on, scrolling. Here it is, Donna at Fort Sill isn't the one. You know, Dickwad, I'm confused, because I have emails from you telling me all 3 of these women were the one. I'm no math wizard, but but I think you've now got 4 the ones. I pressed on. Look, I could not care less about either one of you. You, dickwad, as I said, are dead to me. You, my unfaithful friend of a wife, I am stuck dealing with because of our kids for basically ever. My point is that you two sit here so angelic trying to tell me that this romance of yours is something you couldn't control, something that was bigger than you both, when in actual fact, you're both just unfaithful jerks that, frankly, deserve the hurt you're going to put on one another. I've actually started a pool with the rest of the guys from our unit to guess which one of you cheats first and guessing how long you're together before the whole thing becomes a disaster. This enraged my soon-to-be ex-wife. How dare you? How dare you try to poison our friends against us? They are just as much Barry's and my friends as they are yours. Just because your ego is hurt and you can't understand what true love is, doesn't give you the right to put our friends in the middle of all of this. She turned to Dickwad and said, "Don't worry, baby. Once they see how happy we are at the wedding, everything will be fine and Mr. Bitter over there will just have to deal with it on his own." Dickwad tried unsuccessfully to sound conciliatory when it was obvious that he was trying to rub more salt in the wound. "Yeah, Jim, I know that the wedding will be the first time that the whole crew will be together and you won't be included. Peggy and I kicked around the idea of inviting you to the wedding so you could see the kids and also be around the gang, but we figured it would be too painful for you to be there. Maybe some of the gang can drop in to see you the next day. They might be a little hungover, though you know how they like to party." There was that smug smirk again, time for that to be wiped off. I picked up my phone and simply texted, "Go ahead," in a group text box. "Oh, don't worry about me. I have plans that are going to keep me quite busy that day." Within seconds, both of their phones started buzzing with incoming messages. If the phones had been sitting on the table, I'm sure they would have been spinning with all of the notifications. "Well, what do you know, speak of the devil here," are a bunch of replies from the gang about the wedding. Jim enthused and immediately opened the first one. He frowned and opened the second one and the third. Peggy, seeing his pained expression, opened up her phone and started looking at the replies. They were all the same. Her head snapped up and her eyes bored into me. If looks could kill, well, let's just say I wouldn't be writing this tale. "What the heck did you do? What do you mean, unfaithful friend?" "You know very well what I mean. What did you say to our friends?" "No one is coming." Every reply is the same. She shoved the phone in my face. I didn't know what the exact words were going to be, but I had a pretty good idea of the message. I laughed right out loud when I read it. "Sorry, won't be there. We have a barbecue at Jim's that day. P.S. Don't mess up your friendship." Dickwad was crestfallen. "I can't believe my guys would abandon me like this." "There's no way they would have done this without some coercion." "What did you say to them?" "Well, first things first, I don't care if you believe me, but I had zero to do with this. If they wanted to go, that was up to them. I would not have been upset nor disappointed. I would not have taken it as the gang choosing the two of you unfaithful fools over me. I've actually spoken very little to anyone in the group about this. I was that embarrassed. But as soon as your invitations went out, I got a call from Dennis asking when the housewarming was going to be. I told him that I hadn't made any plans yet, and he told me that the group had decided it was going to be on the same day as your wedding. I told him that they didn't have to do that it wasn't fair to make them choose, and I was fine with them going to your wedding, but they insisted. Again, I couldn't care less if you believe me, but that is exactly what happened. So, I guess yours is going to be a smaller affair than you planned. I suppose it will save you some money on the meal." They both looked like they'd lost their best friend, which, in some ways, they had. I truly had not done anything to try to ruin their wedding day. I honestly didn't care. However, the rest of the gang took an extremely dim view of what they had done and wanted nothing to do with the ceremony. They contacted me and informed me that they would be coming from far and wide to celebrate my new house and support me the best way they knew how. Truth be told, I knew I'd be pretty deep in self-pity that day, so having the gang around me, and more importantly not around them, was going to be a great comfort for my severely bruised soul. Dickwad was fuming. "Well, that's just great. I show up at every one of their weddings, and when I want them to come to mine, they turn their backs on me." The unfaithful friend tried to soothe him. "Baby, don't worry about it. We knew that there were going to be awkward times." I can kind of understand their thinking on this. While it's a wonderful day for us, it's going to be a very difficult day for Jim, and we made them choose between us. I think it's admirable that they chose the person that's going to need the most support. You'll see at the next get-together. Things will be almost back to normal, and Jim will just have to accept our presence there and deal with it the best he can. I fought valiantly to suppress a smirk. Yeah, I'll have to figure some way to get by. Thankfully, the next party is on my weekend, so the kids and I will have a fun road trip, and I'll have them to keep my spirits up. How do you know when that is? I haven't seen an invitation. I've been expecting it. Jerry and Ann always have it sometime in July. Yeah, it's the weekend after the holiday weekend. I mapped it out on the calendar, so that's how I know it's my weekend with the kids. Invitations were sent out 3 weeks ago. The two of them were frantically scrolling through their phones, the reality slowly dawning on them. Dickwad looked like he had been kicked in the stomach, which, figuratively, he had been. I can't believe my guys turned their backs on me. We've been like brothers for almost 20 years. He looked like he was going to cry, and Peggy put a sympathetic arm over his shoulder and glared at me. You might not have anything to do with this, but you can sure as heck fix it. And I expect you to. Barry and I have just as much right to be there as you do. Again, I laughed out loud, just when I think you can't be more delusional or self-absorbed. You prove me wrong. I have neither the time nor the inclination to lobby on your behalf. Ho, lie. Molly, you two are completely crazy. You have no idea how much of a mess your so-called love affair has caused and how many people it has affected. The gang from the unit is one thing. But, Peggy, your family is devastated. My family is devastated. And all of that pales in comparison to the kids. Her head shot up. Oh no, you don't. You don't get to hold my kids against me. I am an outstanding mother and I have done the research. I know that divorce, while tough on kids, no longer defines them. In fact, in lots of cases, children from divorced families end up much happier and better off after the chaos of the divorce has eased. So don't you go telling me that my following my heart is bad for my kids, because there is nothing more important to me than their happiness. Well, I countered, we know that's not true, don't we? If it were true, you wouldn't have spread your legs for that pathetic excuse for a man sitting beside you. Jim. She shrieked, I just got through telling you that kids from divorced homes more often than not thrive after the divorce is over. I've done my research. I just shook my head, you stupid cow. Of course kids from broken homes recover and feel safer and on a more solid footing when their warring parents finally split up. But that's not what Emma and Liam have experienced, is it? We had a happy and loving home, full of support, full of laughter, and set on a really solid foundation. Now, they don't know what's going to happen, and if you had just sat and talked to them, really talked to them, instead of telling them how great it's going to be, you'd realize that they are, for the first time in their lives, scared and unsure about the future. This had really hit home with Peggy. For all of her faults that had become evident in the last 3 months, prior to that, I couldn't have named a better mother. She was the perfect combination of parent and friend, and she knew when to be both. Who this new person was, I didn't know. But this statement had really struck at the core of who she was, and I could tell that she was rattled. I pushed on. I'm telling you right now, every A that becomes a B is because you are a heartbreaker. Every time one of them comes home and is sullen and withdrawn and just goes to their room, it's because you are a heartbreaker. Every time they see someone smirk at them at school or walk by a group of their peers and hear the snicker, it's because you are a heartbreaker. You've taught my son that no matter how good of a husband he is, no matter how wonderful of a father he is, and no matter how honorable of a man he is, if his wife decides she wants more, everything he has worked for can simply be pulled out from underneath him. He has told me himself that he now can't ever see himself getting married. When I said that, a look of horror came across Peggy's face. Oh God, no. He mustn't feel that way. I gave her a withering glare. Give me one good reason why he shouldn't. The most important female role model in his life has just thrown away the most important male role model in his life. For what? Some special attention? Give your head a shake. What other conclusion is he going to come to? And what have you taught Emma? You might delude yourself by thinking that you've taught her to never accept nothing but exactly what you want, but what you've really shown her is that it's okay to blow up a perfectly happy home for something that is shiny and new and exciting. Congratulations, Peggy, you get my vote for Mom of the Year. She was clearly rattled now. She certainly didn't like what she saw in the mirror I had just held up to her face. It was time for Dickwad to come to her rescue, or at least try to. Don't pay him any attention, babe. He's fighting a losing battle. Once Emma and Liam see how truly happy their mama is, and how much better their home will be, everything will be fine. Jim, I have to say, I know you are hurting, and as much as you don't believe me, I'm truly sorry for that. If there was any way it could have been avoided, we would have done it. But, that being said, you are kind of shocking me here. I've known you a long time, and I've never seen this crazy vindictive side of you. Give us some credit here. We have nothing but the kid's best interest at heart. Oh, I'm sure you believe that. I will never forgive myself allowing a serial homewrecker into my sanctuary. I was conflicted between my duty to the unit and my duty to my family. In my defense, I thought bringing you here would allow me to control things a bit and keep you from destroying lives. My mistake was trusting in the one relationship I thought was safe. I warned neighbors about you. I warned the people where I got you your job about you. The one person I didn't warn was myself, and my kids will ultimately pay the price for my mistake. I will spend the entire time between now and what I know will be your ultimate breakup protecting them from you two morally bankrupt jerks. My only hope is that at least one of you does the inevitable and messes around before Emma comes of age in 5 years, because if not, I can pretty much guarantee Dickwad will be coming after her once she does. Talk about dropping a bombshell. With a roar, he leapt from the table and came after me with molten fury in his eyes. I was totally expecting it and calmly sidestepped his attack, and after a short time of him flailing around, I had him cinched into a very tight and very painful armbar. When we served together, I was basically in charge of showing him the ropes, and while I may have taught him everything he knows, I sure didn't teach him everything I know. He screamed at me, "You jerk, I'm going to hurt you." Funny how bending someone's arm right to the point of breaking it stops them from talking. Shut up, you piece of garbage, or I'll snap this thing off and shove it up your backside. Jim. Peggy shrieked, "Stop this right now." You let him go immediately. I really mean it. I hissed in Dickwad's ear, "Are you going to calm down if I let you go? Give me your word, no matter how unreliable that is, and I'll think about not making you have a cast in your wedding pictures." Forget you. I cinched it even tighter. He squealed in pain. "Barry, just tell him you're going to calm down. He's not worth it. I'll step down. Just let me go. Say please. Forget you." "Oh, now you have to say pretty please." I pulled it tighter. I swear I could hear bones cracking. I have to hand it to him. He was handling the pain pretty well. But everyone has their breaking point. Let me go pretty please. With an evil grin, I let him go and pushed him away from me so I didn't have to worry about him trying to swing at me. Turns out he was a little smarter than I gave him credit for. He turned around and glared white-hot fury at me. But he stayed back. Peggy was beside herself with rage. "Jim, I swear I have no idea who you are anymore. This man saved your life, you saved his. I know you are mad, but to accuse him of such a sick, hideous thing is beyond disgusting. How dare you say these things? I can't properly put into words how disappointed I am in you." I just shook my head at her. "You think this is just my anger coming out? That I'm just throwing these accusations out to upset you? Sit down and listen to me before I go." I looked over at Dickwad, who was still staring daggers at me while he was shaking out his arm, trying to get some feeling back in it. "Hey Dickwad, help me out here. I've got 3 sayings I need help with. Care to help me understand what conquering a challenge, achieving a triple play, and completing a perfect game mean?" His eyes widened, but he didn't want to face what he knew was coming, so he tried vainly to put off the inevitable. I have. No idea what you were talking about. Probably some more made-up stuff like you've been spewing since you got here." "Really?" "Denial is what you are going with. Suit yourself and don't say I didn't give you a chance to come clean." I looked over at Peggy. "Well, my dear, adventure seeker, let me give you a lesson in Dickwadies. First, in most countries, conquering a challenge means successfully accomplishing something difficult like overcoming an obstacle or achieving a goal. In Dickwadese, it means getting involved with two women in the same family. In fact, he stayed with the one before you just until her daughter turned 18 so he could date her. I don't know if poor Amy knows he dated her daughter, but it was only a couple of weeks after that he broke up with her. That can't. No, it just can't be true. Barry, tell me it's not true. Good old Dickwad did his bass in a boat impression again, and his mouth was just flapping open and closed. Oh, it gets better. I enthused, achieving a triple play. Instead of what we think it means accomplishing 3 successes, in old Barry's world means getting involved with 3 women in the same family. He did that one a couple of times. Now, don't worry, dear. I've already alerted your dad about old Dickwad's charms, and he's told me that he'll never let your future hubby near your mom. Even, I have to admit, for an older lady, Donna's still got it going on. At this point, I think my former buddy Barry would have paid to have the world swallow him up. His face was red, and he suddenly had an almost obsessive interest in some lint on the floor. And finally, the ultimate. Hitting for the cycle. In baseball terms, it means getting a single, double, triple, and home run all in the same game. Hey, old buddy, why don't you handle this one with your fiancé? No? Cat got your tongue? Okay, allow me. That's girlfriend, her daughter, her mother, and her sister. Now, in fairness, to my knowledge, he's only accomplished that one once. Yep, managed to wreck 3 families in one fell swoop. I have to hand it to you, buddy. You are a master homewrecker. Oh, and Peggy? Don't worry, Darren knows all about Dickwad's knack for going after his women's sisters. He was, how would I put it, less than impressed. Let's just say I wouldn't count on the annual family trip to the Jersey Shore with Leanne and him and kids happening this year. One last thing. I suspect you don't believe me. And I suspect that old Dickwad here is going to deny it and try to spin it so he doesn't look like the bad guy. I held up my phone. If you want proof, just ask. It's all in here. I looked at the two of them. That smug, arrogant, patronizing attitude that they came at me with was totally gone. If this was a prize fight, it was the point in the later rounds when I'd landed so many body blows their hands were down. They'd spit the mouthguard, and they were ready for me to finish them off with one more punch. But I knew there was no need for that. They would do it to themselves. I'd had enough of the two of them. I just wanted out. I looked over at Dickwad. I'm done here. Once I pass through the front door, consider me gone. Because you will be dead to me. If you see me at the soccer pitch, stand at the other end. If you see me at the school concert, sit on the other side of the auditorium. Unless one of my kids is in real danger, never contact me again. Do I make myself clear? He didn't even have the courage to look at me. I looked at the cheater. For you, I have an apology. I'm sorry I didn't protect you better from this awful predator. I know you think you're happy, but I will 100% guarantee he will break your heart if you don't break his first. I loved you with all my heart at one time, and will state unequivocally that you were a good mother until he led you astray. I led him into our sanctuary, and for that I will forever be ashamed. You are a mature person, you will recover, but he will make you a less effective mother he already has. When you come to that realization, just know that I will have been doing everything I can to minimize the damage. You've absolutely devastated me. I have put aside any personal happiness for the next 7 years until our kids are both old enough to fend for themselves. It is my penance for losing sight of what was important. I loved you for 17 years. For the last 3 months, I hated you. Now, I feel less than anything. I acknowledge you as the mother of my children, but that is it. I'm forced to deal with you because of our children, but that is the only interaction you and I will have. Goodbye. I turned and walked into the living room and suddenly realized the court-appointed supervisor was still there. He was sitting there with a totally shocked look on his face. I had totally forgotten about him. Oh shoot, I'm so sorry. I have totally wasted your time and put you in the middle of something I'm sure you didn't want to witness. I'm done here. I have everything that matters to me. I should have just let you go earlier. I truly apologize. Can I give you some money for your time and trouble? We were walking out the door, and he looked totally shocked. He just looked at me and said, "Sir, this isn't my first time witnessing something like this. I've done a number of these, and they are generally pretty unpleasant. But I've got to say, that was the most epic beatdown I have ever witnessed. That was next level mad respect to you. You owe me nothing. Good luck moving forward." And with that, he shook my hand, hopped into his vehicle, and was gone. I hopped into my truck, the few things I really wanted safely stowed in the box, and headed down the road to my new life, dignity fully intact. 10 years later, Peggy and I were twirling around the dance floor at Emma's wedding. "My gosh, she's beautiful," I enthused. "Yes," Peggy replied. "She seems to have inherited all the best features of both of us and managed to avoid the bad stuff." "So how are things going with Greg?" "He seems like a decent guy." "Where did you guys meet again?" "Work, was it?" "Yes, we did meet at work, but you don't have to pretend to care. I know I made my own bed." "As you predicted, Barry was as you had advertised, and to my shame, so was I. I traded in a Cadillac for a shiny new sports car that did nothing but break down and cost me everything. For what it's worth, we weren't his first victims and we weren't his last. He still has some contact with a couple of the guys from the unit, and from what I understand, he's still up to his old tricks, leaving chaos in his wake. A leopard can't change his spots, I guess." "I know, but I can't believe I lost sight of what was most important. And thank you for not rubbing my nose in it after he and I split, or even after Bill or Ethan. I know you could easily have done that. I know you think that I haven't changed either, and my history with men sure wouldn't lead you to think otherwise, but I like to think deep down in my heart that I'm simply looking for what I had with you, and if I don't find it, I move on. I know now what I had, and I'll go to my grave regretting losing sight of that." I smiled at her. "Oh, don't be so hard on yourself. I am nearly impossible to replace." She laughed and slapped my arm. "Humility was never your strong suit." I nodded. "In all seriousness, I hope now that the kids are doing well, you can find happiness again. You did a great job with them. I know I had my doubts, but you proved me wrong, and I will be forever thankful." Even Lori is impressed, and coming from a broken family like she did, she really related to them. Peggy smiled. "You know, I tried really hard to dislike Lori, but come on, how can anyone? She's fantastic, she makes you happy, and the kids love her. Thank you for choosing someone like that." As the song ended, I looked across the floor to see the love of my life smiling at me, and I knew I had to be with her, like right now. "Thanks for the dance, Peggy. I wish you happiness. But I need to get back to my wife."